Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with Nate,
How y'all doing?
and we may be joined by a third, but he has not shown up yet, and so we're just gonna get rolling with the two of us, and we are here tonight to discuss Rudyard Kipling's poem, "Recessional." So, Nate, you said you kind of liked this one, so would you like to start us off?
Yeah, it's a really great reflection on sort of the danger of empire, and how it can lead to hubris. It's a prayer against that, and me, I always like a good prayer, but I said I love this, and you kind of get this idea that Rudyard Kipling understands that power is corrupting but also fleeting, right? Once you're corrupted, you fail, and then what's left to you, because your power falls away as well, and now you don't have your old faith and your old strength to fall back on. And so, you kind of get the some notes from the first stanza of this idea of like divine right of rule, God of our fathers, known of old, Lord of our far-flung battle line, beneath whose awful hand we hold dominion over palm and pine. They're like, it's because, God has willed it so that we control all this vast stretch of earth, and so let's not forget who gave us the ability to rule.
Yeah, and it's and if you look what they did while they had that territory, I mean, you can talk about, imperialism and arrogance, and they were ruling over all these other people. They also stopped the slave trade worldwide. I mean, that's a pretty significant accomplishment for the good
Yeah.
that they did while they held this power.
And also brought standards of modern science and medicine to formerly tribal regions. A lot more good than harm was done, I'd say.
Yeah, it's so rewinding just a little bit to the poem itself. It was actually really surprising to me, um because this is not what I think of when I think of Rudyard Kipling. And perhaps that's my shortcoming. Perhaps I just haven't read enough of him. But like, I don't tend to think of him as very religious, and I wouldn't put the word I wouldn't put the word humble. Like that wouldn't be an something else I would describe him with. But like that, both of those describe this pretty well. And it's yeah, it's actually really kind of painful for me, reading this and thinking about this, because the refrain that he comes to at the end of every stanza, lest we forget. And I look at our country today, and I look at I look at Western Europe today.
And we've forgotten.
Yeah, and it's like, and
Or rather, not even worse, not that we've forgotten, it's that, you know, the it's still there, like me, you, right? You know, the faith is still there. It's just that so many people look at it and go, no, I am not willing to subordinate to that. Goodbye. So it's not even just forgetting and letting it fall away and worshiping, the power of empire. It's just deciding you don't want to do it anymore.
well, and it's also like, if take it, not just, lest we forget, if you don't just talk about religion, if you talk about like the history of your people, if you talk about, the greatness of your culture, like that is largely forgotten also. And like, I think in that respect you could probably say, like, you know you and I and Chris are probably slightly better off than a lot of people today, but at the same time, like, compared to what my parents were taught in school, and compared to what their parents were taught, in school, and about, us, about our people, it's like I think even we have forgotten quite a bit, or you know had never had it passed on to us.
Yeah, we
And
kind of have to go out of our way to find the information about, what we've done. But I mean,
yeah,
parents, largely, and definitely our grandparents, and on before that, were educated in a time before the government was that big a part of it. So that's why they're smarter than us, or at least that's why they're better educated, at a baseline because yeah, they were taught things. There wasn't a whole bunch of lowest common denominator crap being pushed out of higher levels.
well, and the other thing, and some people would probably accuse me of sounding like conspiratorial on this, but like it seems like there are a lot of people who are invested in making sure that we aren't taught about our history, that we aren't given pride in our people, aren't given pride you know in our fathers, and that we don't connect our identity to our past. And
Yeah, because if you yeah,
they've been
if you cut off
terrifyingly
people from their
successful.
identity, that's it. If you cut off people from their identity and the history of their country and their people and all that, it makes it a lot easier to get them to swallow globalism and think that, oh well, who cares about history, right? We need to move forward into the glorious future. Guys, the glorious future looks a lot like the past.
Well, it
Just
could
kind
if we're not if we're not careful.
of.
Um,
So it's either going to be the past but shinier, or it's going to be exactly like the past, you know,
well,
depending
oh,
on if
okay.
you pay attention to history or not.
I think okay. I think I mistook like human nature. Like there are inherent things. There are inherent principles in human nature that just aren't going to change. And so like yeah, the future is going to look a lot like the past in that respect. And then you know there have been changes in history, there have been changes in society, but almost all of them have been the past 500 so much of it has been okay. What I guess I'm jingoistic. A lot of the actual change and growth has come pretty much from one part of the world, and relatively recently. Like if
Yeah,
you
about let's see. What are those terrible, terrible, terrible people live on that peninsula with a bunch of peninsulas sticking off of it, and they tend to be monochromatic.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
and then they went and beat up a bunch of perfectly innocent, freaking, religious warriors down in a slightly less monochromatic part of the world. And that's kind of when things started to really move forward.
yeah, it's the other thing, the other like big hit on this poem is for me is in the last stanza, and he talks about for heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shard, and he says, he's talking about a gun,
Yeah.
or like I mean, you could scale that up to a cannon, but the basic idea is, well, we have this military technology, and it's
the the British had a really great little rhyme in their empire that their soldiers would kind of recite to themselves.
whatever
Whatever
happens.
comes, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. So
But the thing is, you can have the Maxim gun and they can have spears. Not even bows and arrows, they can have freaking spears. And if they believe in what they're fighting for and you don't, it doesn't matter. You lose. And I think we're seeing how that plays out.
yeah, I mean, like I said, he's talking about all this, and he hits like all the great scenes, right? Of why we need to remember, the faith that allowed our forefathers to build these mighty, these mighty effigies to human strength, right? Like the tumult and the shouting dies, the captains and the kings depart. Still stands thine ancient sacrifice, and humble and a contrite heart. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget. And he's talking about, it's like, the captains and the kings, right? The guys that led us, the great figures that stride across history's stage, they come and go. And when they're gone, what's left to us but the lives we have to lead and the faith to keep strength until the next great person can show us the way, you know? Or we can show ourselves the way without needing the great person because the greatest of all has already come and gone and contritely sacrificed himself to save us. It's I love this because there's a song that I really enjoy. It's called "Of Dust and Nations," and it says, "Put your faith in more than steel. Don't store your treasures up with the moth and the rust, where the thieves break in and steal. Pull the fangs out of your heel. Because we live in but a shadow of what's real." I was like, they say, step out in time, and see the dust of nations. You know, it's like take a look back on history, all these great and proud people that rose up, God rose them up in their time and he cut them down in their time. And understand that that's you. You know, says says you can rise by whatever means, but without God's help you will not. And you will fall by whatever means, and with God's help you will. And so this just plucks that cord another way. And I love it. It's beautifully done.
What was there's oh crud, lost it. Oh, it is kind of funny to me looking at that stanza. Someone who's was an English major and worked as a proofreader for a while, because there's actually a grammatical error in there that he did to make it rhyme, and it just kind of pokes at me every time I go past that line.
And
Be- do you see what I'm talking about or no? It's the tumult and the shouting dies. There's two subjects there, so it should be plural, and the tumult and the shouting die. Um, but to make it rhyme. Anyway, not a terribly interesting feature of the poem, just something that poked at me.
not really no. Oh God, but like I said, he said we this needs to be wider read.
Well, I'm trying to do my part. What was? Oh, there was.
I kind of love how you get like the sort of old timey racism, such boasting as the Gentiles use or lesser breed without the law. And I was like, hey. But
It,
honestly, the whole idea of the lesser breed doesn't mean they're worse people. It just means, you can put that to like, the idea of the culture.
well,
Because
and it's
yeah,
also
all people born equal, right? Everyone has potential. You can rise and fall by our own lights, so long as your culture allows it. That is where cultures have greatness or less greatness.
well, and the other thing with that, like, I mean, if you wanted to go like biological, like the culture, like long term, culture, doesn't culture shapes, our biology, even our genetics, because the culture determines what kind of people get to have kids, and you'll get to survive with those kids, and that changes. I mean, unless you believe we're born, blank slate with nothing, with no character at all, which is,
Anyone who has children knows that's false.
well, anyone who has more than one child. Because if you have just one child, you can think, but like if you have two, you're like, okay, yes, they're different. They're pretty much different from the moment they get here. But like unless you think like we're born completely blank slate, like there's something there from the moment we get here, and seems likely there's some kind of genetic component to that. And so a culture that like I think it was England, for uh, 100 years or so. They had what was called the Bloody Codes, and they like just execute like criminal executions were like just at a level much higher than normal, and like some people argue that significantly changed the level of antisocial violence in the population later, because anyone who was inclined to you know
That
assault.
activity.
Huh?
Anyone inclined to that sort of activity got weeded out.
Yeah, and pretty thoroughly. So but it's and so like a culture that's lived in the Christian worldview for say 1500 years, like a lot of Europe has. That's actually changed who the people are in some ways, I think, um, or at least it's plausible to argue for that.
Eh,
But today we have a culture that is rewarding, in terms of passing on your genes, pretty much the worst people imaginable from almost any rational perspective. So,
well, doing our part there too, right?
I'm trying.
Or maybe we're the worst people. There's no telling.
Well, some people certainly would think that about me. I would be firmly in Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. I'm well planted at that. So some people
Look,
definitely would hold that opinion of me.
if you're in the basket, I'm the handle. All right.
So, what was okay? Trying to think about the. Let's see.
Back to the poem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Who
It
can try hard?
honestly it struck me as sounding a little bit like Lewis. I was like, I'd read it the first time. I went back and read it, earlier today to refresh my memory, and I couldn't stop. I was like, yeah, it's Recessional by C.S. Lewis. No, it's not C.S. Lewis. Who is it? I had to go back and look it up. I was like, oh yeah, Kipling.
What
Nerd.
was Well, and the other thing that's kind of fascinating about this, because I looked up a little bit of the story of about the poem, and it was actually written um, for the what do you call it? Here, sorry, one moment.
I strike thee down.
I'm back. But oh, it was written for the Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1897, and it's and I don't know if do you know what recessional means? Like what the term refers to?
It's a liturgical term, right?
Kind of. It's the song you sing as the priest and altar attendants are leaving, and as the congregation is going to leave. And so it's kind of funny because apparently Kipling had originally been planning on putting the white man's burden in that place in for this jubilee, which is almost exactly the opposite in terms of tone and message. Um, and so, and then there's this one, which is, I'm afraid our empire may be coming apart. And he was kind of prophetic in that, I guess, because like basically people say what World War I was, when the British Empire started to fall apart, and this was 20 years before. So
Well, I mean, this is a warning. It's like you could see the things going, that will eventually bring down the empire. You could see, kind of see the little cracks in the wall, and he's like, "Hey guys, uh, we need to address this. We can't let sort of the base, the cement that's holding our bricks together. We can't just let that erode like this. We need to go back, tread the old ways, go back to the basics."
Yeah, it's and like we've kind of referred to before, I read this poem and I look at where our country and Western civilization as a whole is today, and I'm like, this is quite scary. Um,
We've abandoned our twin inspirations, right? Ravi Zacharias, I think, said that Europe, Christian Europe, gets the twin benefits. It's the meeting point of Athens and Jerusalem. We have the very cerebral Greek logic, and the history of science and logic and rigor. But we also have the faith coming out of Jerusalem to teach us about things beyond our mental sphere, beyond this observable universe, to teach us deeper truths that way. And so with those two together, they gave us the power to rise above what the human condition had been for, since time immemorial. But now we've walked away from Jerusalem, we've run screaming. And now with all this whole subjectivism, we're walking away from Athens too. Everything, no,
there's no
you know,
truth,
it
or
don't matter. It only matters how you feel. But if you feel that climate change is not man-made, you are a science denier.
right, and
Excuse me,
it's
why? Try and figure out which bathroom we should all use.
well, and it's this weird thing, and I think Stefan Molyneux's talked about this. Have you watched any of his?
Couple things,
And it's this
actually.
weird thing where like you have this relativism and you'd think what that means is okay, well, whatever you think, just go with it, it's fine, it's but it's entirely the opposite, because when you if you believe there is an actual truth, you can argue with whoever, and you can even argue on somewhat friendly terms, because what you're arguing about is what the truth is.
Right.
But if you don't believe there's an actual truth, you can't argue, you can't have a discussion with someone you disagree with. All you can do is try to impose your will over theirs. And that's a very ugly place to arrive at. And
Hey, hey, kiddo. It appears that the young one has made an appearance.
yeah, he came in a little bit ago. His mommy is down for the night, and so he decided to join me out here. So um,
Well, I'm surprised my oldest hasn't got up to tell me about whatever dream he is having. It's like you've been lying awake in bed for 5 minutes, and you're coming to tell me you had a dream in that time.
actually, I totally get that brief, brief side journey, because I know sometimes if I'm in the right frame of mind when I'm going to sleep, like I can like vividly like picture things in a way that I don't have that kind of visual imagination normally, but like when I'm about to go to sleep, I can deliberately visually imagine things that I usually can't that way. But okay, I think we might have to wrap up pretty soon for the night. So, were there any other big things about this one?
Just the other half of that last stanza, right? For heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shard, all valiant dust that builds on dust, and guarding calls not thee to guard. For frantic boast and foolish word, thy mercy on thy people, Lord. This whole idea that, unless you build on a substantial foundation, right? Something that is greater than the works of man. I don't know if you could hear that thunder roll, but that was well timed. Unless you build on something greater than man, valiant dust that builds on dust. And eventually your dust will be built on by other dust. It's just that you have to, it really anchors it home. You have to, from the personal level all the way up to the highest level, the highest organization of humanity. You have to build on truth.
Have
You know,
you
we're,
um have
we're
you
just standing
seen
on time,
what's his name? Give me a moment.
nothing else does.
The Tom Kratman, that was it. Have you seen Tom Kratman's essay about the Battle of Lepanto?
I have not.
Okay, yes. I actually, with his permission, I recorded it as a video. I might post the link with this video. It's and I'll send it to you after we get off here. But basically, he says like, you know, the moral of the story is, don't bring a knife to a gunfight, and don't bring secular humanism to a religious war.
Fair.
And yeah, that seems to be what we're looking at in many ways here.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, well, I think we could keep going for a while, but other circumstances are compelling a short evening. So I am going to close off the recording for tonight in 3, 2, 1.